Well, good morning, Council. Good morning. Let me first off start by saying, giving my accommodations to the executive branch, the administration, and formulating a very comprehensive appropriations bill for this body's consideration for the next fiscal year. This budget continues to grow for the Cherokee Nation. Seems like every year we're adding to it. We're adding funding sources. Dollars are going up. Initiatives are coming into motion. And there's an enormous amount of man hours. I speak from experience. I used to direct the budget and financial reporting department of the Cherokee Nation before I came over here. So I have a good appreciation of how many man hours are involved. The staff, I do commend Callie and the budget department reporting that's in attendance today, and in collectively pulling together such an enormous workload of information from so many different sources, program, personnel, funding sources, and accumulating those in a way that enable me to get my arms around something of this size and be able to stand before you and even present a review. So with that, again, I'm thankful of the privilege of reviewing this budget provided by the executive branch. Have included line item budget review, staffing request review, all from the accounting system, prepared summary reports to compare with last year or this current year budget all the way back through fiscal year 2005. Note that throughout all the report and all of the review, any references to fiscal year 2008, our current year, are their annual projections based on actuals through July 25th and projected out through the remainder of the year. And keep in mind that most programs administer a higher percentage of their authorized budget late in the year. That's a fairly constant trend, a consistent trend throughout most of the programs. All comparisons to fiscal year 07 and beyond in time are actual audited books. A few notes to compare. Obvious impacts, $60 million coming in related to the Hastings Hospital assumption. Primarily coming in with 50% compact funds and 50% third-party billing revenue. Second special note has to do with the indirect cost pool, or what we sometimes refer to as overhead. Captures all the costs associated with the budgets that are not easily allocated to the specific programs, and in turn allocates those costs out based on a percentage rate. And that process has changed this year in the way it projects its recovery. That's something I wanted to briefly touch on. In the past, the indirect cost pool would budget its recovery or funding at the same amount as the sum of all the budgets that are in the pool. It just budgeted a break even, whatever the expenses were. The Treasurer's Office is projecting the recovery in 09 at the amount of budgeted indirect costs to be paid in by all the programs. So now we're looking at the flip side of the equation and saying who's budgeting indirect costs as a cost to that program is a source of funds in the pool. So whatever everyone's accumulating to pay in their submitted budgets on the program side, all of their indirect costs as they accumulate sum up. That's what we're projecting in our recovery now to the pool. Okay, it's a different philosophy of how to budget for indirect cost recovery, how to fund the overhead. Although it would seem to make more sense by budgeting what the programs are anticipating to play in, close monitoring of the actual funding level being generated by the programs will be imperative in 09. The IDC pool has requested a $5 million increase over the 08 level and a $9.4 million increase, or over 50% over the 07 actual. So we're laying into motion a significant increase in indirect costs or overhead that, although it appears to be adequately funded at the same 16% rate, Okay? So the same 16 cents of every dollar is still going to pay overhead. The actual cost associated with that overhead pool has a significant increase in it. And rightfully so, because there's increased base programs that are going to have to be supported out of that overhead, such as Hastings and a lot of housing activities that are recent additions to that base. If the programs that pay indirect costs significantly underspend their budgets, which is a trend, it's a historical trend, and in result, underfund their anticipated recovery to the pool, we could experience significant under-recoveries that will result in a rate hike in the future. I'm not saying we're going to experience this. I'm just saying it's something that we all need to be aware of, because that monitoring of that pool with this new philosophy and that significant increase in IDC costs, we need to watch it close to ensure that we don't overgrow our overhead, for lack of a better term. Essentially, all the anticipated funding being provided by the programs is being budgeted by indirect cost centers. Understanding all expenditure authorizations that this body appropriates are subject to the availability of the funds, there's a strong possibility that not all $28 million estimated funding will be available for expenditure by that pool because of what I just mentioned. The programs may not pay in that much. So we're going to have to watch the availability of the indirect cost recovery funds. And I can say this, in the past when we've experienced an indirect cost recovery, theoretical under recovery, which is we're rolling through this year and the programs aren't paying in indirect costs because they're not paying direct, they're not expending the direct costs that are charged to IDC, and we end up with a pool that is somewhat under receiving its revenue stream. Cali has in turn reacted at mid-year and either put capital expenditures on hold, new additional hires, vacant positions on hold. She's taken preemptive measures to address that. And I would expect she'll be monitoring this going out through fiscal year 09 as well. The reason I bring it up, committee, is due to the significant impact that it does have on the program side and the potential impact it can have in future years on the program if that rate were to spike up again. It's been several years since that rate spiked up, but we got up to 24% at one time. You take 8% of direct expenditures out of the program's hands and it has a material effect on the delivery of service. Lastly, enough about IDC for now. Lastly, this budget has an increase in full-time employee equivalents. The budget contains funding for salaries and the related fringe costs for approximately 2,800 existing positions at a cost of $127 million. These existing positions include the tribal hires at Hastings. It does not include the MOAs and IPAs. Those are considered contracts. So they're not in the salaries. They're not in, the MOAs and IPAs will not be reflective in any salary and fringe related information in this review. Okay, they're strictly contract service payments. The budget request contains 256 vacant positions at an additional cost of 9.3, as well as an additional 136 of new positions at a cost of $6 million. One side note here on these numbers, the dollar amounts are what they are. They are exactly pursuant to the submitted numbers by the administration. The head counts, I do need to make a small clarification. Anytime a program submitted a payroll worksheet associated with this budget and failed to identify a part-time amount of hours worked, I had no idea of knowing, therefore I treated it as a full-time equivalent. That's going to overstate a few of these numbers. When I went back and tried to determine how many, I ended up with about 50 employees that probably should have been categorized as a part-time equivalent that was treated as a full. So half of that would be a potential overstatement of these additional positions, which would be 26 positions. I wanted to clarify that because this is the first time, Council, that we've actually considered a budget that had no line item budgets with it, no blue book, as we used to refer to, and the entire submission was electronic. All line item budgets were electronically submitted on those CDs that were in your white book, and the payroll worksheets were submitted electronically. So for the first time, I was able to actually use staffing-related information and head count numbers and manipulate it through the computer without having to manually go through all 500 budgets in that blue book. I really commend y'all for doing that, because it really made this review on that side much easier. Getting back to the numbers, the unfilled positions, which represent the vacants and the news, represent 37% of the number of existing positions and cost $4.4 million of discretionary funds. The primary purpose of pointing out the significant amount of discretionary funding being requested for staffing-related expenditures is due to the fact that the Gen Fund's recurring revenue projection is flat compared to 2008. So if the tribal discretionary funds are relatively flat, and the carryover projection is decreasing in this budget by $20 million, but yet new hires are increasing on discretionary funds, this results in a future question of sustainability of these recurring personnel costs. In summary, 1/3 of the total comprehensive budget is directly related to personnel costs, and 12% of these costs are related to the unfilled positions. Additionally, it's unclear how the budget actually contemplates the physical space requirements of 300 and something additional employees. Historically, we have a significant number of budgeted positions that remain unfilled. That's just a fact, and it has been for as long as I've been here. If we ever get to the point where we are materially filling all vacant positions, whether they're existing, vacant, or they're brand new positions in the budget, then we're going to feel it. We're going to feel the impact of that result quicker on space costs and required space just to house these people than we will even see it on the impact on the financial statement, because there'll be definitely a significant requirement on space allocation. One other thing I want to point out, the Tribal Council's budget submitted to the Treasurer's Office included a line item for the continuation of the community assistance funds of $170,000 or $10,000 per counselor. That line item was not loaded into the financial system for 2009 by the administration, therefore was not included in the budget amount of $473,735,000. I appreciate the opportunity to review this for the council, and I sincerely hope that I've served you well in this review. And with that, we can move into some key points of interest. Associated with these numbers. First point, the Tribal Discretionary Fund, also known as the Gen Fund, and as Callie has gone over, contains 13 new requests. These initiatives range from recurring service programs to unappropriated reserves. These requests will utilize a little over $2 million of discretionary funds, and they're detailed out later, and they'll be redundant to what Callie's already presented to you this morning. The budget contains approximately 256 of vacant positions and 136 altogether new positions. That nearly every group that is budgeting vacant positions, or positions that they, for one reason or another, they don't have filled, are also requesting new positions on top of those. The salary and fringe costs associated with those are over $15 million, or 10% of the total nation's budget for salary and fringe. So what we're saying is about 10% of our total head count is not filled, that's provided for in this budget. And if we do start filling that 10% up, we've got space issues to deal with. Well, let's see. Point number 3, several programs are consistently budgeting minor increases over the previous budget level, but are equally consistent in spending much less than their budget. Obviously, when tribal discretionary funds are consistently appropriated or budgeted yet remain unspent at the end of the year, I'm talking about discretionary dollars, these tribal dollars never get utilized. This trend can result in a consistently increasing carryover balance, which is what we have experienced in the last few years. As you progress through the group's review and departmental comment sections of this report, several of these group trends are provided. And lastly, although the budget indicates a total use of funds of $474 million, the budget contains over $40 million of federal road funding. An estimated $25 million will stretch far beyond the 09 fiscal year. The interfund transfers of $18 million, capital acquisitions of $21 million, and reserves of another $21 million are also included in this budget. Taking these items into consideration reflects an actual tribal government expenditure budget for operating of approximately $389 million. Any questions on this slide before we move on?
Do all your departments have trends?
Yes, sir. Yes, that's a good point, Dr. Kopp. I added a new report, a new style report to the legislative review this year that actually shows a 4-year trend on budget versus actual. Usually in the past, I've compared this budget request to the last year budget, and then I compared it to the last year that we closed our actuals. Well, this time I'm comparing not just to that, we're comparing budget to actual within every year of the last 4 years. So we can see those trends, Dr. Cobb.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And you'll see those at the back of each group section that have a group number identified behind their charts.
Okay, Ms. Joy.
Doug, on those 256 vacant positions up on number 2 on key points of interest, can you track how long within each department some of those positions have been vacant?
Yes, I can. It would take an enormous amount of time because of the manual nature of trying to track those positions. And if they change the title of them, I would lose that history of vacancy and treat it as beginning a new vacant life, so to speak. But keep in mind that these positions, these payroll worksheets, for the first time are electronic this year. So in the past, I don't have, it would be a total manual effort. And it would take a significant amount of resource to get that done.
Can we tell on the 136 new positions which of them may be similar to the 256 vacant positions?
They will not be the same position.
Similar.
Okay. They may be similar in nature of what that position is, or compensation or duties or whatever. But when we say new, they have not been in. The budget preparer is instructed to identify a new position in the budget as one that has never been budgeted before. It's new to this year. If it was a position new last year and someone filled it and they left right before the budget and it happens to be vacant, that's not a new position to 09. 09 news are supposed to be brand new positions that's never been provided for.
Within these departments that are asking for new positions and also contain vacant positions within their budget, square footage, are they asking for increase in where they're going to put these bodies?
Well, it's a good question.
Increase in space?
And that's what I was attempted to point out in my introductory memo was that, and don't get me wrong, Council, I think it's wonderful that we can anticipate bringing in and offering employment to this many more people at the Cherokee Nation. I think that's a wonderful thing that we can incorporate into our future planning. There are obvious concerns such as space. When we've heard of people coming over from other programs that are either crowded up together, or we're still trying to get them a space for a cubicle or an office, or procure an outside space. It's something that I think the administration will be contending with over the next year. If they fill those positions, they're going to have to. And I think that they're aware of that. I just felt that we needed to bring this up because it is an element that could present some issues for this body during fiscal year 09.
The funding of these 392 positions, is this Gen Fund money, or is this funding through grant, or?
Predominantly it's program dollars. Okay. I believe there's a $2 million impact to Gen Fund. Okay. I did that. What did I do with all my papers?
See how nice I am? It's drinking.
So about 13 million of it would be program dollars and about 2 million would be general fund?
Yeah. Gen Fund has $2 million in the new positions, okay? Gen Fund, tribal discretionary. Of the 136 news, 41 are Gen Fund. Okay?
And on the 256, is that all program dollars?
67 are Gen Fund of the 256. So 108 of the 396, about 108, a little over 27% of them are Gen Fund, at a cost of $4.3 million.
Which would mean about 11 million, then I guess would be program funds.
13 to be, yeah.
Well, you said 4.3, that's 10.7.
That is too, did I say 392?
4.3 is all together.
Yeah, 4.3 is combined. 2.3 on vacants, 2 million on news. So that 4.3 on unfilled positions is 4.3 of positions that are not here employed at this time.
Is our Gen Fund
Thank you.
money increasing at the same pace that we're asking to increase the employees from Gen Fund?
Well, there's an item buried down in this review that touches on that, because for once, the Gen Fund staffing package, Gen Fund only, has 4.3 million unfilled positions, over 13 million of filled positions. Okay? 30% comparatively. The dividend increase is 3 million. I think I've got a comment somewhere in here that we'll get to, that of the 3 million discretionary increase on Gen Fund of the dividends, 2 million of it is consumed by default with the new positions being added into this budget. Two-thirds of the dividend increase is consumed in employment costs.
Am I to understand then that the positions we're trying to fill or trying to create, our Gen Fund is not keeping pace with this many, adding this many new or filling this many vacant positions from Gen Fund?
That would be my assessment.
Is that an
as well.
accurate statement?
I believe it to be an accurate statement.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to point out a couple of things on the Gen Fund analysis. This was an area where there are some temporary positions in the budget that Doug has picked up as vacant positions, because they were indeed vacant at the time the budget was prepared. One of the largest areas of vacant positions was villagers for the Historical Society. Those are seasonal jobs, and so they are included on this list of vacant FTEs, which is 100% accurate when the budget was prepared. Another area is in government relations. There are 4 listed as vacant FTEs. Those are actually summer interns, which it was vacant when the budget was prepared, but they're not full-time employees. I certainly agree with Doug in terms of being careful about how we budget our discretionary funds. I think this is an excellent staffing report that Doug pulled together here. And if you will also notice on the new positions, a large piece of that, they're classified as new and probably should have been vacant. Those are requests for, we call it succession planning. Those are deputy group leaders for several of our groups. We requested the budget in '08 and have not been successful in recruiting those positions, but there's still definitely a need there for that. That's for 6 group leaders. But I just wanted to point out some of that. When you start looking beyond the totals, some of these are vacant for a reason. They're either seasonal or they're hard to recruit positions.
Mr. Busser.
And I think, Kelly, Doug, you've answered the question I had, because the question I had is where is most of these 136 new positions going to be gone? And you've answered most of it, Kelly, but there's still several more in there that we haven't talked about.
As we go through this, I'm going to actually peel back those positional increases by department, division.
That's fine.
Okay, on both the vacants and the news.
Okay, all right.
Ms. Jordan.
I'm going to wait until he peels it back now.
Dr. Cobb.
The community assistance funding, or lack thereof as it is, what tab should that come under?
Tribal Council.
That's what I want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, Tribal Council. Okay. This charts the new initiatives, and again, this will be redundant. Callie's already went over these items. One comment, I did make a comment, and as well as Callie did earlier, on the unappropriated reserve, because all appropriations are theoretically, all dollars are theoretically reserved. They're not authorized for expenditure without an appropriation to begin with. So anything in unappropriated reserve actually represents the current surplus at that time. Ms. Jordan.
I just wanted to make sure now, in that unappropriated reserve, Kelly, 820,000 was taken up with this additional page, is that right?
Actually, it's 620. The 200,000 being requested for the self-help water lines would be additional anticipated carryover from those projects in '08.
So there's roughly 700,000 left there,
Yes.
and none of this budget includes any proposed carryover at this time, right? Because you don't know what carryover will be.
Selected carryover. There is selected carryover in this budget. In fact, it comes up to a little over $23 million. What I did is I analyzed the authorized budgets for 2008, and those that were project-type budgets, such as self-help water lines, we've got several projects in health, electronic dental records, those sorts of things. Those are the carryover estimates that are in the budget.
But right now, we do know that line item still has about 700,000 in it.
Correct.
And I would add that although I may personally feel that the carryover is extremely light in this budget, and I would expect $15 to $20 million to be coming into the budget process between now and the end of the audit process in January, it's not my prerogative to estimate the revenue. That's the Treasurer's Office by statute. I do appreciate her concern of putting an unidentified number onto the table for appropriation until we know what that number actually is. It's not that these dollars are not going to be able to be appropriated. They're just on hold till we know what the actual number is. Even though all of this is an estimate. It's all an estimate. And to remind the body that this is a proposed budget. This is just a proposed budget. This body determines what the appropriation bill is, of course, and it can be this proposal can be modified, and historically is always modified by several items. So, Ms. Fishicon.
Last year, I was sitting here and we appropriated this budget, and all through the year they kept bringing in money and bringing in more money. I want to know the difference. from what we appropriated to the end of the year, what the amount we actually brought in carryover through the months and budget fund. It wasn't on the table at the end of the year. What's the amount?
Oh, well, we'll probably have to do a little research on that, but we can definitely get it.
Okay, I'd like to have it.
Okay. I can get that during lunch. Okay, moving right along. Cherokee Nation revenues. This is a good chart because it shows how we have increased our carryover from year to year to year. And again, 05, 06, 07, 08 are consistently increasing these carryover numbers up to $126 million in the 08. You'll notice here that the 09 budget has a reduction of carryover or prior year funding of $46 million. That's a significant decrease. Now, when I first looked at this chart, I expected it to be 09 to be significantly higher than that because we've got all of housing, we've got our HUD, we've got all of Hastings alone should be spiking 60 million above. But that spike has components to it that's drawing it back down to where you see it's relatively flat. That represents a $9 million increase. That's what that represents. Total revenue from 09 to 08 is a $9 million increase. Well, Hastings alone, as you all know, is approximately $60 million that is increased in this budget. However, that's being drawn back down to a net of 9 because 08 had over $12 million of capital projects in it that aren't to be recurring. It had a $20 million reduction in Gen Fund carryover estimate that Callie's already mentioned, as we know that Gen Fund's carryover is less than it is in the 08 budget by $20 million. And a $10 million judgment fund entry for those judgment, those permanent funds from the Bureau that happened in, those entries are in 08, not to be repeated again in 09. So those are the effects. There's one-time effects in 08 that is offsetting the big Hastings.
New initiative carryovers
Excuse me?
of last year.
I'm sorry?
You made a statement of new initiative carryovers of last year.
New initiative carryover? Well, I did.
That's why
The carryovers, well, I handed out a report that I emailed out yesterday to everyone. This particular report identifies in pink all the initiatives from last year, the $12 million worth of initiatives. I didn't go in with a calculator and add all of them up of what their projected remaining balance is.
You run it for me back when in June or something.
Just rough, adding it up in my head going through it, looks like around $7 million of the 12 won't be expended by the end of the year. And that includes a couple of items that are actually reserve. I mean, they're reserve entries not to be expended.
And there's
But
$6 million that's not going to be spent.
correct. Yeah, and as we go through, we're going to see more of these coming into play through the review in individual items. Any questions on this before we move? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, this chart depicts a 5-year history of where are we in actual spending against our budget, as well as what's our total expense budget doing. It's a nice trend. It's going up. Now, compared to the chart you just saw, This is continuing on a trend upwards. The revenue has flattened out. So if we haven't spent our carryover, and these budgets, we start utilizing more than 70 to 72, 74% of our budget, we start utilizing upwards around 80, 82% of our budget, we are going to consume that overhead, carryover, I'm sorry. We're going to consume the carryover. Just for the fact that the expense budgets are increasing at a faster rate than the revenue is. So theoretically, if the current year revenues aren't growing at the same pace, then that funding has to, by default, come out of prior year carryover funds. As you can see, that 2007, these are audited numbers. And $100 million out of a $366 million budget was not expended. Now that, there's a lot of things that contribute to that $100 million. I mean, there's a lot of funding in there that couldn't have been expended because they were related to construction projects that took 2 years, or they were related to roads that may last 10 years to get built. Or, I mean, there's several components here, but I wanted to point that out because when we look at the budget, we think $500 million. There's a significant difference between what that total number is and what we're actually going to write out in checks. Okay. Any questions on this particular slide? Again, this authorization increase in 09 is a $28 million increase. 67 is Hastings, diluted somewhat by gen funds going down by 32 million, largely related to what appears to be about $20 million carryover that's not being put back in, as well as the general fixed asset account group for the capital projects of $12 million. That's not recurring in 09. And one other comment. I think as we progress and consistently improve our budget tactics and our budget processes and start incorporating a true capital budget beside the operating budget, some of these variances are going to go away because we're trying to commingle a capital budget technique with an operating budget technique, and it gets very convoluted when you combine multi-year funds and budgets with a one-year operating appropriation budget. Okay, quick chart on the dividend income. It's always a good chart.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. Doug, is there any way that you could tell us what those multi-year fund budgets are? And I know you just said $35, $38 million in roads. You take some of your water and sanitation stuff, those are multi-year budget funds too. So you're looking at what, $40, $50 million in there that's multi-year funded budget. So is there any way you could break those out? Or any more like that? Is the self-governance, that's not a multi-year funded contract, is it?
Yeah, we could identify all the ones that we know are multi-year grants, things that we anticipate being stretched out over numerous years, and we could try to come up with some. That's okay. Number.
I just want to make sure that we know that in these budgets they are multi-year funded budgets, and you're talking several $1 million that's carried over from year to year. That's okay. Go ahead.
I would like to see us move towards an annual appropriation bill being an estimate of an annual expenditure, and not have all the road money put on, or all of the all the entitlements that are beyond the 12-month period that appropriation bill, because I'm not really sure technically or legally we can even do that. I don't know how we can. I mean, if these years are designated for multi-year, I don't think it's appropriate to put them in a current year appropriation. Because I'm not sure how we can appropriate future year revenues when we haven't got to that physical cycle yet. But
thank you. I would like to comment on that. That is one of the frustrations when you start analyzing how we do our budgets, and that's one of the priorities that I would like to work on with this council, is to come up with a methodology to do a separate project budget. Have our operating budget, which is for our annual operating expenses, and when we know that we have funds out here that are going to be spent over several years, let's do a separate process and authorize all of the roads one time, They rarely change. We have the money in the bank, but, you know, Michael Lynn's group requests spending authority for the full amount of funding we have, because sometimes, you know, he may plan to work on this road and then this other project takes precedence, so he needs to have spending authority for the entire project. And I think that is something that we can work on for next year's budget cycle, to separate these project multiple year type spending from our normal operating budget. And it will probably take some legislation to get that accomplished.
Good. We'll be happy to work with you on that.
And one thing we might consider too is, now that Lawson has the capability of activity-based accounting, we could authorize one total dollar amount for roads construction and allow the roads department to obligate or deobligate within the various roads by activities.
Yeah.
But as long as they stay within the appropriated dollar amount of the appropriation bill. And it'll help these discrepancies, like you point out, Harley. We've got a lot of opportunity to improve, but I can tell you we have made tremendous strides over the last 5 or 6 years and several years in our budgeting process. I think each year we get a better product before this body, and enable the body to make a better informed decision. Next slide. Are there any questions on the, as you can see, the 39 million is related to 130 million projection, which is up. C&E's net income is up by 10 million on the projection of 120 the previous year and 100 in 07. Okay. The dreaded IDC budget chart. This is the most difficult chart for me to explain, and probably I'm not serving it well in trying to explain it, but I know it's very difficult to grasp what I'm trying to depict here. And I'll just say this. If we focus on the growth of the indirect cost pool, the overhead budgets that are support budgets for all the programs, we're seeing a significant increase in budget, up to over $28 million. We don't see much of a surplus because of the way that we're budgeting. We're budgeting all the programs to pay in. Now, what concerns me on this chart, I would have expected if the entire base, the entire program base, all the programs that are spending their money and getting charged IDC, that IDC charge, knowing these programs have monies that are going to stretch beyond 2009, I would have expected their funding level to be significantly higher and had more of a funding surplus in blue in 09 than what's in here. That's the reason. This chart right here is the reason the comments on the imperative monitoring of the recoveries of the indirect cost in 09. It's because that blue part at the top is not, there's a theoretical funding here of only $545,000 more than what the pool's authorized to spend. That's very close. Any questions on this chart? I'm not going to spend much time on this one. You can see the good thing is you see the IDC rate going down. That's a wonderful trend. We've gone from now 20%, 20 cents of every dollar, down to 16. So that's a very good trend on the rate. Motor fuel tax. Work with me here. Okay. This is by division. You notice a decrease in the education component of the motor fuel tax budget. There was some heavy utilization of scholarship funding in 08's budget. Some additional funding came in for a specific purpose in 07 that didn't get expended for all of the increased applicant level of the Cherokee Nation Scholarship, but it did come in heavy in 08 as that communication and activity increased, and we're not seeing the 09 budget at the same level. It's significantly higher than it has been in the years past of actuals, just not at the same as 08. The financial resource increase is, yes?
When's motor fuel compact play out?
2018, I believe. 17 or 18, motor fuel. Is it 97 or 98?
I think it's 2017.
It's around 2017. About 9 years left. Everything's relatively flat here, other than the financial resources going up, and that's not a use of, I mean, that's bringing in the estimated revenues and transferring it out to all the programs. So it's good to see financial resource have higher amount of money to transfer to all those other divisions, and that's a revenue budget. Any questions on this chart before I move on? Okay, salaries and benefits, Cherokee Nation as a whole. Okay, now this is the entire nation. You see the increase. It's a $20 million increase in 08 over 07, and another $20 million increase in 09 over 08. Again, it's good that we can offer this type of a benefit for the Cherokee people to offer more employment opportunities and jobs. Well, as well, that's a major initiative of the government, as exhibited in the Job Growth Act. Dr. Cobb.
Is that, what percentage of that is directly related to new hires? Of that 20 million every year? Your statement was, it's good that we can hire and offer health benefits and those kind of things. How much of that 20 million between 07 and, well, more than 20 million between 07 and 08, almost 20 million between 08 and 09 is directly related to the amount of money we're paying out for health benefits and salaries and all that?
The new equivalents.
I guess what I'm getting at, is this just is this a hike just because of everything's going up, or is this directly related because we're hiring more people?
It's a part of both. It's a part of both. You have the merit increase impact up here, probably 3% of a total, 130, there's $5 million right there just in merit increase. Also in here is a recurring employee appreciation incentive that HR has in their budget for $2.5 million approximately. But the new hires account for about $6 million of that.
Between 08 and 09 or 07?
Yeah, 08 and 09. 08 and 09. I don't have it available for the...
But the new hires is about 6 million of that 29?
Yes, sir.
I mean, of that 19?
Yes, and the vacants, I guess the vacants really wouldn't be a comparative because they were already in the 08 budget. They wouldn't be a part of the 20. I don't know if that's a good answer. As good as I can do right now. Thanks. Is it lunchtime? Do we need a break? Continue. One good aspect on this chart is you notice a significant utilization of these dollars back in 5, 6, and 7. And one thing that can drive that in the system is if we do a lot of reallocations and utilize salaries and fringes for vacant positions throughout the year, and then we turn around and remove them late in the year and use them for other line items such as supplies or travel or et cetera, then that's going to make the budget versus actual on salary and fringes closer in line and a lot higher utilization. Let's see. Next couple of charts are focused on kind of breaking this large budget down by functionality, by group. And major group being the government and board side compared to the service divisions compared to the resource divisions. And this is a very nice trend. As you can notice here, we have a $19 million increase. Health alone is $14 million of the 19. Housing, because of when the 100+ employees came over at mid-year in 08, accounts for another $3 million. So 17 out of the 19 of that chart's increase right in the center, right into direct service budgets, are related to health care and housing. And there's a table on page 3 of your book of this section. You're going to get into page numbers at the top right corner. There's a table there that breaks these out further by actual groups, okay? So you can see exactly what group each, or what category each group falls in. The next chart's the same comparative, except with, instead of the dollars, it's the head counts. Okay, and again, that table on page 3 will provide you with more detail. Moving right along. The vacancies by department. See, the lion's share of that is the health division with 89. Human service comes in behind that with 34 vacancies, and education with 29. Those new hires we talked about that are new to the budget process, here's a graphical depiction of where those are coming from. I think, Mr. Buzzard, you had asked about those. You can see human service is carrying the majority of the new hires. 17 of those 39 of human service is in the rental assistance program, and 10 are in child support enforcement. You see a big section down there under health, 26. 8 of them are related to direct care, and 13 are in community health and preventive services. Financial resources has a significant increase of new hires with 17. Succession planning accounts for 6 of them, and 9 relate to the Hastings assumption. We're seeing the impact of the Hastings assumption.
Of the 256 vacancies by department in health, how many are direct?
49. You on the chart before this?
Yes. Out of 89, 49 are direct.
40. Yes. Yeah, and I have the breakout. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, I had the breakout of those large pies there on what the departments constitute them. Health, the 89 in health, 49 are direct care. Okay, 49. 17 are in community health, and 11 are identified into group leader. And I don't believe it's 11 in Melissa's department, but it's in her, or in her. There are 11 in her department. Let me see if I can tell you right here. Okay, there we go. They are six new positions in the executive director, IDC budget, 1 in the health service deputy group leader. Does the succession planning deputy leaders not include a health deputy?
No, actually, health is the one group that requested their budget be pulled out separately in '08, and we did make that change through a budget mod, and they have been actively recruiting, but the position is still vacant.
Okay, on the new hires in health, out of the 26, how many is direct?
8. 13 are, okay, now we're on the other chart, right? Let me finish pointing out a few things on this vacancy chart.
One second, Ms. Jordan, did you have?
I think we're going to have a lot of questions on these two, and I wonder if this might be a good place to break until about 1:30 for lunch.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yes.
It's been seconded. So the motion is that we recess until 1:30. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're recessed.